Good morning to all of the attendees and welcome to today's episode. I'm Anja Borcherds, Consulting Business Manager at our Professional Services Department. It's a pleasure to be part of this Masterclass webinar series that we are hosting as a company, and I hope you will find today's session insightful. Today I'll be talking about best practice in the payroll environment, and I'm going to add a little bit of a different spin to it, as I would like to incorporate general business strategy with the best practice. I mean, isn't strategy what business is all about at the end of the day? I won't be advocating any typical rule book. This is a very informal session that we can share some tips and tricks in the industry to utilize in one's business. Use it, don't use it. It's just an insightful session to share some tricks. Okay, so to sort of my approach, I'd like to go into a little bit of detail in terms of defining what is method. So method is a systematic or established procedure to undertake something step by step. And isn't payroll exactly just that? Step by step in order to pay people accurately. So that is why I would like to incorporate the strategy of a business, because ultimately it should be the backbone of what we do in the payroll environment. To look at the strategic aspect in terms of business practice, let's go into our first step, which is recognize your dependencies. So ultimately, in the payroll environment, we've got service providers, we've got policies, we've got procedures and compliance, deadlines, and data gathering that we need to adhere to at the end of the day. So I'm sure I don't need to tell you, but sometimes being in the payroll environment can be a very unthankful job, because the thank yous can be very little and the queries can pile up very quickly on your desk. Which can become quite demoralizing, but at the end of the day, it's very important to understand the valuable part you play in the bigger company. I mean, without you, none of the employees would be able to receive a salary, right? So Vital is not running independently, and it's obviously important to understand that we need our service providers, which is typically your systems. We need the policies in order to adhere to them, and then there's also the compliance part of how we need to capture certain earnings deductions, company contributions, and structure some salaries in order to pay correctly. So there's a lot of moving parts that should work together to actually solidify your approach and your end goal. Ultimately, it's also important, and the policies basically dictate the business or help the business to become more organized and efficient so that you can actually do what you need to do. So by going over onto step 2, which is identify your target customer, we've got internal customers and we've got external customers, if you think about it. So our internal customers, and initially I only had employees as my main target customer, and after some thought, I think yes, ultimately your employees is your main target customer, because they are the ones that shout the loudest and they are the one that smile the biggest as well when they receive their salaries. So, but other than that, our internal customers would also be finance, it would be your line managers, and it would be Exco. Finance, because we need to report to finance on a monthly basis, provide month-end reports, general ledger, in terms of doing the finances, and also line managers and Exco, more specifically to report to line managers movements within the department. What is your typical departmental payroll costs? And also displaying certain trends to them, increase in overtime. There was an increase in new recruits. There was a mass exodus of employees. So to identify certain other problems. And also in terms of EXCO, for monthly EXCO reports, some of you might have seen the session that Stefan Jansen van Rensburg, my colleague, presented last week on the Power BI. So the Power BI reports and dashboards would typically be very valuable for the EXCO team, which is also your customer, because in order to provide them that data, it needs to be accurate so that they can actually talk about it, pinpoint certain trends by having a look at one dashboard and then taking it further in terms of discussions for board meetings and EXCO meetings. Our external customers are, of course, our lovely friends at SARS, Department of Labour, and of course, auditors. I think some of us dread the word auditors because they are usually coming around on month end, as we know them. So yes, definitely plays a role, and ultimately we also need to make sure and define we adhere to what they find within their audits and the suggestions that they have as well. Step 3, what your organization wants from each department. So ultimately, an organization's got a lot of departments, which forms a greater company. Every one of us is obviously employed in the entity to define a specific role. And that's why the ultimate goal is management or EXCO trusts all of these people in these different roles in such a way that they will be able to define sustainable operations in order to gather, maintain, provide information. And isn't that what is so critical and crucial for the payroll environment? Because at the end of the day, payroll management needs to work in conjunction with other business functions. So yes, the operations is actually going about, and maybe payroll might be the last department that they actually think about, because operationally they just need to go heads down, way forward, and move on and get the job done. But ultimately, there should be sustainable operations within those departments, things like clocking systems that makes it easier for both the specific department as well as for payroll to get the relevant information in order to capture it in such a way on the payroll that it's in time for you to process, to double check your work, to send it back to the department for sign off and all of those things, so that there's ultimately that measure of control. Buy-in is obviously a very big part within the payroll processes and best practice, because if you don't have buy-in from the rest of the departments, it can become tricky, because then you receive data late, and at the end of the day, how that just puts more pressure on the payroll department. So yes, really defining what the organization wants from each department, taking that and incorporating that in the payroll environment in order to get to your best practice. Step 4, what the stakeholder groups want from you? That is quite a obvious answer, but ultimately it's to provide accurate and precise salary payments and systems that they can rely on, because at the end of the day, your system that you are using for the payroll environment has got certain compliance measures and the way it's been calculating. So it should be a trustworthy system that you really believe in, you as the payroll department, you believe in it, you know it off by heart, and you can really utilize the system in order to pay accurate and precise salaries. At the end of the day, it's also to a certain extent your responsibility in terms of putting measures into play to attract top talent, become the employer of choice, and also market related salary reporting. I think we are in an environment where we are moving towards technology. We're already within technology, but I think it's important to really understand at the end of the day what you need to provide as well in terms of reporting from a payroll point of view. We're sitting with a lot of data on payroll, and ultimately to give that back and to push it back into the business is what's ultimately a very powerful tool. I think it's we're sitting actually on a gold mine is not necessarily the correct word, but in terms of data and to give the business those ammunition basically to tell them, look at the trends of the overtime, where to identify the cost creeps, where your cost creeps is coming in, what are the travel trends, you know, really your top 10 in sick leave. It's all those types of things that's very valuable and becoming very valuable for your management teams to view this. Then going over to step 5, strategy design, customer service and hassle-free compliance. So the strategy, in my view, ultimately is you need to provide a service as well. And you know, because employees and all of our target customers has got certain wishes, and every individual has got their own set of rules of how they want to be treated in terms of getting a service. I think, you know, by designing your strategy, ultimately, that is, if you receive good service or if you give good service to any individual that deals with the payroll department, it immediately opens up their minds in terms of, wow, I got great service. So instead of, you know, being upset about higher tax, it can actually become it's a little bit softer if you actually provide them with the best service from a payroll point of view. And I think that's where the importance comes in, specifically to have a subject matter expert within the payroll department as well. And I'm not suggesting that all of us should be tax experts, CAs, or anyone with tax degrees, not at all, but really to invest in knowledge. Go for the training courses, make sure you're on top of Rob Cooper's tax advice and seminars that he's hosting, because ultimately that's also where we learn. We've got a better understanding in terms of the taxes, and in order to relay that to the employees to better understand why certain things happen, why there's tax increases, tax table increases, what happened to the medical aid now in terms of tax credits, you know, all of those nitty gritty things that people might actually forget about that can influence the payroll. So yes, it's making people happy at the end of the day in terms of the strategy. That's of a big importance in the best practice world. Then step 6, continuous improvement, and I think this can become a tricky one. At the end of the day, payroll is you've got your framework in payroll that you need to operate within, and there's already a lot of compliance and a lot of rules that's dictating what you can do and what you can't do. And to have your framework is one thing, but also to listen to your target customers or your organization is also, to me, something to adhere to, which is more a conversation. It's not a immediate yes or no, but it's more conversation, because we need to have a hands-on approach in the ever-changing payroll environment. I mean, things can change within days in the payroll environment, and I think to really stay on top of it is ultimately a challenge sometimes. So the self-awareness to make certain things that's not working better, to retain the actual buy-in from the organization, is very important to me, because you do need the cooperation from the bigger company and the rest of the departments in order to retrieve and get your data accordingly, and basically in such a way that they adhere to your deadlines and timelines. So yes, by really opening up the conversation sometimes. So, okay, what can make it better for you? Okay, this is my framework. Let's meet each other halfway type of thing. And by doing that, it also creates your payroll voice. I think buy-in at the end of the day, to me, is much better than just hard no's. So people really need to understand where you are coming from in terms of your approaches, by really understanding why you do certain things that you're doing. I saw the other day on LinkedIn actually a very valuable quote, and I'm going to read it to you. It's quite funny. It says, "Being a payroll administrator is easy. It's like riding a bike, except the bike is on fire, you're on fire, and everything else is on fire." So made me laugh. So yes, and with that, 20 minutes to 15 minutes is already gone, and we've come to the end of this session and our time together. I hope you got a little bit of insight. It's really not something cast in stone. It's just some tips and tricks and putting a little bit of a different spin on best practice. I'm not here to teach you how to do payroll. I think we all know the boring steps of payroll and what we need in order to pay salaries. But yeah, to really give it a little bit of another mindset is what's important to me. I hope you've enjoyed the session. If you've got any questions, we won't be opening up the floor for questions, but we've got a Q&A section. If there's anything you'd like to know, you're welcome to pop us a question in there. We'll ask for your email address and then respond to each individual's question afterwards. Thank you so much for attending this session with us. It was a great pleasure to host this, and yes, I hope you have a lovely week further. One day and then it's the weekend.